For me, I don't have a traditional art background, and a lot of people don't realize that I have a degree in a master's in history and a
Mhm.
master's in counseling. So for me, I don't know where to even start. Um, just making artwork is an important part of my life, and being a creative person is ingrained in me. Um, and so I don't know what I would do if I didn't have those things in my life. Curating, painting, visiting museums and galleries, it enriches my life in such a way that if I didn't have that, I would probably walk around depressed all day.
Yeah.
And you would not want to be in my orbit, I don't think, if that was the case. So just making work is important to me, and being a part of an artistic life, having an artistic life, I should say, is important, you know. Um, and so I just can't imagine having a life that doesn't involve that. What is, as far as you're concerned, I mean, can you imagine not producing work? I mean, I remember the first time that I met you, I was walking on the street in Nashville on the way to a gallery show,
Hmm.
and you had just given birth, I think, or about to give birth to your first child.
Hmm.
And, and then after that, we talked about how you miss that, being a creative person, but then having to take time away, and being a mother, and trying to work that. So,
Yeah.
uh, for me, finding the time to paint and being having a family and having a job and everything else, it's important for me to create and to be around it all.
Yeah.
Uh, I just can't imagine not having that in my life.
Yeah. And did you growing up, um, like you said, you're connected with a creative life. You come from family that were like, we're going to take you to museums.
No, I grew up in a small town. I think I remember the sign when you entered the town was like 396, population 396. So
Oh,
it
that's
was a
right.
very small town, and luckily we had a dedicated art teacher. A lot of schools in my community or my county, they would share an art teacher between the schools, but we had a dedicated art teacher, and I learned a lot from her, and had a lot of confidence in my ability to draw. But we didn't really explore painting a lot. And so when I graduated from high school, I just went to bookstores and museums and galleries, and um, that's how I learned to paint and continued that um, down that path. Just being the idea that you could go to school and become an artist was very foreign to me.
Yeah.
Growing up in a small town before the internet, before computers and smartphones, and I toyed with the idea of becoming an art teacher, but it just didn't happen. Those are the first programs to get cut, and most schools, if you're lucky to have a teacher, they're split. And so I don't know. I just chose the path that I did, and I'm very happy that I did. But I would go to instead of going to bars and clubs and all that kind of stuff, I would go to the library on Friday and Saturday nights, and I would pour through art books for 3 or 4 hours, and I would make notes in my composition notebook, and I would find an article in an art forum, and I'd cross-reference it with a book, or a bibliography, that I'd found, and then I would make notes, and then I would just go to the bookstores like Barnes and Noble or the Borders in Nashville. That was so wonderful. It had such a great collection of contemporary art books,
Hmm.
and so that's how I learned to be an artist. I had that in me, but I needed some guidance, and those things provided guidance to me. And North Alabama, Huntsville is a growing town now, but at that time, the museum, which I feel like is kind of has a conservative mindset, um, I didn't really find much here, so I would gravitate to a place like Nashville or Atlanta or Birmingham,
Hmm.
and that's how I learned, about art, or eventually going to New York and places like that. It just really opened up my mind on to what is possible, and painting and art in general.
Mm-hmm.
So
You are a researcher.
yeah, I can't stop buying art books. I think I've purchased probably 15 to 20, probably more than 20 art books and photography books since the beginning of the year. I just have this massive collection because I want to become educated, and it's just this need and desire to, um, like a sponge, just to soak it all in. I
Yeah.
went to Strand back in February, and I think I came back with like 8 books. And I just got back from New York again, and I had like 4 or 5 books. And then I bought 2 or 3 more that I just didn't get a chance to buy. So, and I'm
Yeah.
like, where am I going to put where am I going to put the books? But it's just, I don't know. I just have this desire to know all there is to know about, an artist or a movement or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just, I don't know. That's just where I come from. So I guess being a self-educated, self-taught artist, I think is important to self-educate. If it's not in the cards for you to go to art school, then that shouldn't stop you. You know, and so that's the way I feel. And the same thing with curating. I feel like that's a very important part of my being. That I
Mm-hmm.
just I want to do that. And as you know, I did curating contemporary for probably 6 or 7 years, and I curated or had others curate probably 60 plus shows on the website, and they were serious shows.
Yeah.
And then I had so many people that I was booked like 2 years out, so I started another site, which is no longer there, but it was curated contemporary projects, and I would curate shows for myself of other artists, and so it was just a constant flow, but I could not get enough.
Yeah.
It's the same way, but things have kind of changed. So now I do Eraser, which you were in, and other artists that and I know. And so I moved from the website to curating for a publication, because there's nothing better than having a book in your hand and flipping through and, being engrossed in all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. You said you don't know where you're going to put the books. Do you have a library at home?
oh, I do. I have a friend of mine built a bookcase similar to the one that came out of an old school, and it's like maybe 8 foot by maybe 8 foot long and maybe 5 foot tall. And so he made one the same dimensions, and he gave it to me maybe in February, and it's probably 3/4 full now. So I have 2 bookcases. So I need a third bookcase, unfortunately. But in the beginning, when I didn't know much about the art world, I would go to Barnes and Noble or Borders, and I didn't have a whole lot of money, so you would buy books like Picasso or Modigliani or Monet, Manet, those, and then you would find out about other artists, and that's when I kind of shifted to Pollock and de Kooning and Klein and Richter and Rothko, and then you learn about Freud and Basquiat and Schnabel and Diebenkorn, and the more you read and the more you educate, the more you want, more, like contemporary artists and such. So.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where most of my library is now, is mostly contemporary people. So, those early books like on Picasso and, those surveys like Rizzoli or something like that, I've given those to the library or other artists over time and
Yeah.
replaced those. So,
That's great. Yeah, I think my mom once said that when I turned 16, I was so excited because I could then drive myself to the library and to church. And she's
yes,
like, you haven't, maybe I think my studio is my church now, but yeah, I can relate to kind of just pre-internet, like just having a research practice before you called it that, just because it's like you just wanted, that was the way you figured things out.
you just made it work. I remember my first studio was a 1-car garage with a light bulb that was is not unlike a Francis Bacon painting. I mean, it was just like one light bulb, dangling down, and it was like 110 degrees in there. I mean, like no air conditioning, no light, no anything, but you just, you just went for it because you just made it work. And I think the same thing with the books. I think you just, you continue to explore and mine and research as much as you can.
Yeah.
And I think that makes you who you are as an artist and as a person as well.
Do you envision what life will be like when you retire from your like day job?
Yeah. I don't know. I've thought about that for years. And when that day comes, I imagine I'll spend a lot more time in the studio, because the studio time ebbs and flows, when you have a day job and a family. I remember the days of working 40 hours a week and then coming home and painting from 4 or 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And then on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, just getting up, 8 or 9 o'clock and start painting until 1 o'clock in the morning. You just did that. But now I have so many other things, so many irons in the fire, I guess you would say, that I don't have as much time in the studio as I would like. So maybe when I retire, I'll be able to return to that kind of that life, But I guess a lot of that early on was just trying to figure out what it was to be a painter and an artist in general. A lot of exploring and mining away, and some good work, and then probably a lot of bad work. But that's again how we become artists. I think I don't know of anyone that could went from the first floor to the top floor without really putting in the hours and the time and everything else. But I feel like you've navigated that life because, again, going from when I would see you out and about, and you were producing work, making work, but didn't have the time, and then you've had this explosion in the past 2 to 3 years. It's just kind of like it's like, whoa, that's you've really produced a lot. So I think as adults, we just make things work. I remember meeting tons of artists in Bushwick years ago, and they all had degrees from Pratt or Yale or wherever it was at the time. But then they would work like crappy jobs, because they just were trying to make ends meet and trying to make work at the same time. So,
Yeah.
I guess we just figure things out, make it work on our own.